Absolute pleasure and a delight to be starting our ET Now Go Hyderabad edition with a very rare management, the top management of Aurobindo Pharma. To give you some stats here, by revenue, Aurobindo Pharma is India's second largest pharma company. Aurobindo Pharma at one point in time was part of the Nifty 50. The company, in a sense, has really reoriented themselves in what they were versus what they're planning to do. Now today, we are trying to really touch base on some complicated topics, biosimilars, peptides, vaccines. But I can promise you, my guest is someone who has promised me to really make all these complicated topics, which sound complicated, very simple. So it gives me great pleasure now to welcome Dr. Satkarni on ET Now Go. Thank you very much. Very complicated topics, right? Biosimilars, vaccine, peptides. Let's start with something very basic, which everybody is really talking about. Tariff aa raha hai. In your understanding, since decision making has not been done, it's only hearsay, how do you see the pharma regime changing if tariffs are at play?
It's an interesting question, but again, as you rightly said, it's still a hearsay. We still have to see what tariffs really mean and what really comes onto paper. But it's a simple scenario with US market. US is primarily a buyer market, unlike other markets. A buyer market is driven primarily in generics by 2 or 3 major players like McKesson. Now, what happens in a typical buyer market is there is a seller to a buyer relation. As you know, India has around 40% of the generic space in the US when it comes to OSDs, on topical products, primarily in derma, etc. Now, when tariffs get imposed, the natural reaction is to understand that the consumer will have to shell out more. But what we should not forget here is that there's a buyer. And what is the resilience of the buyer? Will seller be able to park all the price increase to the buyer and let buyer absorb it between his higher margins, which may not happen completely? The seller also have to take a shock. And how much will that be? So I think the Indian pharma industry dealing with the pricing pressure in the US over a period of 4 or 5 years now, with roughly around 3.5 to 6% pricing erosion that is happening and the pricing pressure we are seeing, I think we are resilient enough to face the tariffs pressure. We need to see how much would the buyer absorb it and how much would the seller absorb it. But all this again will be very speculative for a business leader like me to talk about unless we see what will happen in real practice. What must not also be forgotten is what would be the Indian government's measure in ensuring that we become part of the US supply network for key products. And pharmaceuticals, being the 3rd largest supplier in the US, forms a key component of US exports. So will we become part of the chosen US global supply network that some of these tariffs pressure will be absorbed based on the government's policies or countermeasures that will come into place once the tariffs are announced? Will define how the Indian pharma industry shapes up. Just to end on that note, in the worst case, for example, the tariffs stay what they are. What it also provides Indian pharma industry is an impetus to innovate into differentiating businesses, which provide higher margins. The differentiating businesses can be biosimilars, biologics, CMO, CDMO opportunities, specialty injectables, etc., and actually distinguish themselves out. I think India, with 35 years of success in the pharma industry and in the generic space, it is moot now that Indian industry takes a step forward and makes a leap giant into differentiating themselves into innovative products. The second point is, can we also reduce the impact of it by having our manufacturing and supply chains established within the US? Some companies have already done that. If you know, Aurobindo has its own R&D center, a manufacturing base, and a huge distribution warehouse in the US. So there are countermeasures to it on how we can reduce the impact of it. But again, most of it is speculative in nature.
We are at the lab facility of the specialty drugs, if I may use
the biologics,
the biosimilars. So which location would you be taking us to?
We would take you to my analytical labs, my process labs. Okay. Essentially, this is the R&D space of 30,000 square feet.
So we'll have a look at it.
You can walk through it,
and
you can see what we do.
Look forward. Come. For Aurobindo Pharma, the whole entry into the biosimilar, you were not the first one to enter? You started late, but you've really progressed up. So biosimilar peptides as percentage of the total revenue, how much is that for Aurobindo? Aurobindo, how do you see that increasing?
So right now, biosimilars are still in commercialization phase. It's been about 6 years that we started this journey. The R&D lab that you are in right now was functional from July 2018. If you know, the peers in Indian industry have started their foray into biosimilars between 98 to 2005. So we are already a couple of decades late. But what we have managed to do in this journey is that in the last 5.5, 6 years, out of which 2 are COVID years, we have an approval right now in UK for one of our monoclonal antibodies that treats multiple indications in oncology. We have 2 positive opinions with the European Medicines Agency, again, for 2 oncology drugs that treat neutropenia in cancer patients. We have a 4th product which treats metastatic breast cancer and early stage breast cancer in women, which is under review with European Medicines Agency. And we have a couple of immunology products which are in phase 3 clinical trials with their patents expiring in 2025-26 domain. So if you see the progression we have made in the 6 years of R&D, because developing a biosimilar is not easy. To give you context, developing a small molecule takes about a 1-2 year horizon and probably an investment of 1 to 2 million. To develop a biosimilar takes you anywhere between 6 to 8 years because you have to bring in a totality of evidence that includes absolute analytical biosimilarity fingerprint to the innovator molecule, then doing preclinical studies. Now preclinical studies are being done away with. Then a phase 1 study in healthy volunteers to prove pharmacological evidence, pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic, and safety and immunogenicity evidence, then do it in actual patients.
So it is certainly more complicated than oral generics.
Absolutely.
It is more complicated than injectables, and it is certainly the most advanced research which is happening anywhere in the world. So biosimilar is that complicated.
Biosimilars are extremely complicated in terms of development.
Why is that, and what do they address?
So biosimilars technically target primarily oncology and immunology diseases. These are life-threatening and debilitating diseases. These are large proteins, multiple kilodaltons in size. They are made in cells. You will see one of those labs where they actually get made. So cells are dynamic system. So you need to map all quality attributes that the innovator has already achieved. So the innovation is on the process side, and to prove the preclinical, clinical evidence to put out a molecule that withstands the scrutiny and rigor expected of agencies like US FDA and the European Medicines Agency is a long drawn process.
So to make it simple for our viewers, if an innovator company in US has an oncology drug, you pretty much would like to come up with a generic but a biosimilar version of that.
So there was a debate whether it should be called a biogeneric or a biosimilar. The debate has been settled a long time ago. So these cannot be generics. These cannot be exactly the copycats of the innovator. They can be similar with no clinically meaningful difference.
And where do you stand in that entire peptide and biosimilar journey? I mean, how far the success has been? Because to be very frank, I've been tracking the pharma sector for almost 20 years now. Indian pharma companies never had a breakthrough in terms of a original molecule. It's only, there was one pre-diabetic molecule, Lipanglum, where success was there, but nothing beyond that. Biosimilar, where do you stand and where does India stand?
So in biosimilars, India has started to do well from 2018, a couple of companies. I would say not all generics pharma majors were able to translate their success in generics pharma to biosimilars or biologics because of complex development procedures, the regulatory expectations, and the investments that go with it. I can talk about Aurobindo and Curatech. In the 6-year journey that we had from starting this lab in July 2018, putting out 4 products, which will be in commercialization phase starting this July quarter, is a significant achievement. I'm happy with the risks we have taken. And importantly, Curatech and Aurobindo are poised to put in at least another 10 more products into the market between now to 2031.
Curatech would be the Merck relationship you have?
No, Curatech is the subsidiary of Aurobindo that does the biosimilars business.
Okay. So how is your relationship with Merck moving then?
It's an interesting question. I'll tell you whatever is there in the public domain. So in 2024, we have entered into an agreement with the global giant MSD, to manufacture one of their biologics products in an entity called Santhanam Biologics. Santhanam Biologics is a wholly owned subsidiary of Aurobindo Pharma. So what we do is a pure play contract manufacturing. Now for a company like us to enter into pure play contract manufacturing with a global pharmaceutical major is a very interesting move. What you need to understand is in biologics manufacturing, because these are extremely complex manufacturing processes, you need to mature your resources over a period of time. In India, that ecosystem is there, but not to the extent that is there in Korea or in China or in the Western part of the world. So I think our move to establish Santhanam Biologics with an anchor industry in MSD, having a product that gets technology transferred from them, having a plant that gets designed to the requirements that meets the stringency and regulatory expectations of agencies like EMEA and multiple other agencies like WHO is an important step forward. Right now, we have signed one product for them. We are establishing a large facility some 20 kilometers from here with 4 into 15 KL bioreactors, 2 into 15 KL bioreactors in the first wave. And this is the largest single capacity 15 KL bioreactor that you will see in mammalian cell culture in India. So you understand, I saw some media reports dubbing it as the whooshy movement of whooshy movement of Indian biologics. So hopefully, I think this will be a harbinger and an inflection point for the Indian contract manufacturing space to evolve in the biologics manufacturing.
Now, in generic, what we've seen is that there is a trend, which is that it goes like a commodity cycle. There are complicated distribution setups which are there in US. There are complicated way in which our pricing is calculated. Assuming that the complexity in biosimilar is much more than what oral generic is, will biosimilar also follow a price trend?
We are already witnessing that in Europe. In Europe, because of the healthcare burden that we are seeing, there are two natures of business in Europe. One is a retail business. Biosimilars still have to be branded in the retail business.
You can buy a biosimilar at OTC or it has to be in the hospital?
No, it has to be in the hospital setting. It is in the retail, but in the pharmacies.
Prescription drug?
Prescription drug. It's a prescription drug.
Which is the world's largest selling biosimilar drug?
There is no, I can tell you world's largest biologic. The world's largest biologic can be Humira. Humira from AbbVie. And there is a Keytruda from MSD. These are all over 15-20 billion.
15-20 billion
in sales.
Okay, to put a very simple example in front of our viewers, and maybe I would encourage you to talk about it. When a patented drug goes off patent, there is competition which comes from generic players. One of the largest patent war was Lipitor. It was almost like a $10 billion drug.
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yes.
When it went off patent, there was huge generic war between companies. So if Aurobindo is looking at, let's say, going to challenge the innovators and enter into the area of biosimilars, then do you have a planned product pipeline where in 2, 3, 6 months things would be coming out?
So we have a planned product pipeline for a decade because there are not many biologics compared to the generics, right? So there are only select biologics, which we will be interested in oncology and immunology space. So we have a plan and a pipeline all the way up to 2032. So there are products which we are entering right now, which are very low risk products, which the patents have already expired. There are biosimilar players in the market. So we are testing ourselves in a already formed market. Then in 25, 26, we will be having products where there will be few players. And post 28, we will be one of the first filers and probably having first approvals. But gone are the days when people said, okay, we can make a biosimilar and there are only 2-3 companies that could make it.
That's all gone.
It cannot be like 30, 40 players knocking on the same generic now, knocking off the same generic. But even in biosimilars, there are at least 6 to 8 companies.
Will price erosion happen the way it happened in generics?
No, it will not happen like the way it is happening. It happened in generics. You can already see a significant price erosion happening in the immunology segment in the European market. But in the US market, we still have to we still have to see the European model. I don't think it is happening like the way the price erosion in Europe had kicked in US has it. But there will be some genericization of the biosimilars in the Europe market, which we are already witnessing. In the US, I am still hopeful that the prices will be extremely competitive for us to have huge margins.
So there is an old business and there is a new business and there is an innovative business.
Yes.
You're part of the innovative business team.
We are in between.
Okay. When will the innovative business or the new business become the mainstay for Aurobindo, which is that the new business, which is a high margin business, actually has more than 50% contribution?
I think the advantage of Aurobindo as a company is that we have a generics base that continues to sustain us over a period of time. The efforts we are putting in the specialty businesses now will start to see an inflection point between 28 to 32. And that is when I think a significant value proposition will start to switch while maintaining our high standards in the generics business and the value proposition we already have. We will continue to enumerate that. But the specialty businesses will start to add a reasonable and significant value between 2028 to 32.
Wonderful. So just to wrap it up with one final point, is India ready for specialty drugs? Is India ready for biosimilars, peptides?
Yes.
Because we do hear an odd name when you speak to doctors and cancer patients that immunology is kicking in.
Yes.
But those are injections which are very expensive. Those are injections which insurance is also not improving.
Yes, yes. It's a good question. While it has to be low, what is important is also about the quality of the product that goes into the patient.
Understood.
So if we have to put out a product of the same standard and rigor expected with the FDA and with the EMEA, then the pricing that we are seeing in India right now is a tough thing. But at the same time, I see the situation improving. Providing access to these products in India is a moot point for companies like us. So if we are successful, I'll just end this, if we are successful in Europe and in US, which is a high entry barrier for products like biologics and biosimilars or biosimilars, if we see success there, then passing on those benefits to the Indian market, to the Indian patients will not be difficult for us. So the idea is that Indian companies now have to take the leap and put their products out in Europe and US on a regular basis in biosimilars and capture the emerging world.
So just to wrap it up with the whole summary, if I have to simplify in terms of the scope or the size of the pond, as markets say, the size of the pond is huge. Yeah. The margins are higher because complexity is going higher. You started slow, but you're picking it up right now. And for next 7-8 years, your product pipeline looks pretty decent.
Yes.
This is a space where volatility in terms of price erosion is unlikely to be there. And because India also is now going up in terms of insurance and per capita, the breakthrough in pharma and medicine will ensure that the affordability in India for biosimilar will also come back. So all the talk of immunology, injections, oncology, which is now right now really been occupied, the top of the pyramid, top of the pyramid patients could soon come to mass market.
I agree. I think the mass market will start to mature in India. It's already started to mature in India to a large extent in oncology. I see the mass market also being covered significantly by insurance by the end of this decade or in the early part of the next decade, which will become a good point for the Indian industry to rally around specialty products and bring them more to the Indian market, especially in biosimilars and biologic space.
Well, Dr. Satakarni, thank you for giving us a tour. It started with biosimilar. I learned a lot about chemistry. You gave me a tour of chemistry lab, which I used to go to when I was a student. And finally, we are wrapping it with where the Indian pharma space is headed. If I could just request you to look at the camera right now and tell me top 3 trends you see in the biosimilar space, top 1, 2, or 3 mega trends. If you can look at the camera and tell us.
I think the time has come for the Indian industry to now take the giant leap and put out biosimilars in the regulated markets, just like the way they have been doing on the generic space for over 2 decades. Every product that we develop, if it goes into the regulated market, I think we are going to differentiate ourselves both on margins and also this will be a significant departure from the generics base that we have into a specialty business space. The second point is, on the contract manufacturing side, I see immense opportunities for India. The infrastructure needs to develop. I hope with the Theranim Biologics initiative that we have started, And I see a lot of other CDMOs coming up in India in a nice way with good infrastructure and resources being put in. The remainder of this decade will also tell us how good we can be in the CDMO space, and are we going to be as good as the Koreans and the Chinese. I think these are the two top trends that I would like to see evolve in the remainder of this decade and probably to the first part of the next decade.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for hosting us, and it's a lovely facility. And
Thank you.
just enjoyed our complete, guided tour by none other than Dr. Santhanam, the head of vaccines, peptides, and the entire biosimilar business. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks a lot.